There comes a point where the pain changes shape. You stop asking why people keep hurting you. You stop replaying what they said, what they did, what they failed to give. And a colder thought begins to take its place. You think, I will make sure this never happens again. Not because you have healed, because you are tired. Tired of being affected. Tired of hoping. Tired of opening. Tired of needing warmth from people who only know how to take it. So you begin to harden. You become less available, less expressive, less naive. You answer more carefully. You trust more slowly. You show less of what is real. And from the outside, this can look like strength. It can look like maturity, like self-control, like finally learning your lesson. But inside, something more complicated is happening. You are not just protecting yourself from pain, you are protecting yourself from contact. That is the part most people miss. There is a difference between becoming safe and becoming unreachable. A difference between having boundaries and disappearing behind them. A difference between peace and emotional exile. When someone has been hurt enough times, they often make a silent vow. Nothing and nobody will ever hurt me again. It sounds powerful. It sounds final. But hidden inside that sentence is often another one. Nothing and nobody will ever reach me again. And that is where the deeper loss begins. Because many people do not lose themselves only in love or family or heartbreak. They lose themselves in self-protection, in the long years spent becoming unreadable, becoming low maintenance, becoming impossible to disappoint because they no longer expect much from anyone. What looks like emotional strength is sometimes just a highly organized form of self-abandonment. You stop bringing your full self into relationships. You stop saying what actually hurt. You stop naming what you need. You keep the conversation clean, controlled, manageable. You become skilled at not asking for too much. You become admirable at carrying pain privately. You become the person who says, "It is fine," long before you know whether it is true. And after a while, you start to feel strangely untouched by life. Not peaceful, numb. You can function, you can speak, you can work, you can even care. But something essential stays hidden behind glass. People may no longer wound you in the old ways, but they no longer truly meet you either. This is the trap. The personality begins to reorganize itself around injury, not around truth, not around desire, not around aliveness, around avoidance. You choose what feels safest. You become who is hardest to harm. You shape your identity around being unaffected. And slowly, without meaning to, you begin to feel less like a person and more like a defense system. This is why pain can create identity loss, not only because it breaks you, because it teaches you to survive by leaving yourself. You stop asking, "What do I feel?" You start asking, "What will protect me?" You stop asking, "What is true for me?" You start asking, "What will keep me intact?" And in small ways, day after day, you move further from your own center. What once felt warm begins to feel dangerous. What once felt natural begins to feel risky. Tenderness feels naive. Need feels humiliating. Hope feels expensive. So you become composed and alone. Carl Jung understood something essential about this. He knew that what we refuse to feel does not disappear. It goes underground. The pain you do not process does not leave you. It changes form. It becomes detachment, control, coldness, suspicion, a subtle contempt for people who get too close. It becomes a self that looks protected on the outside while carrying an unhealed wound underneath. This is where the shadow enters, not as something evil, as the buried parts of you that had to be pushed away in order to survive. Your softness may be there, your grief, your longing, your dependency in its healthy form, your wish to trust, your wish to rest in someone without bracing for impact. If those parts were hurt badly enough, the psyche may decide they are too dangerous to keep near the surface, so it hides them. And then you call the result strength. But Jung would ask a harder question. Are you strong or are you split? Because real wholeness does not come from becoming impossible to hurt. It comes from becoming someone who no longer abandons themselves when hurt arrives. That is a very different kind of power. Most people think safety means building a harder shell. Jung's view was deeper than that. He believed healing required integration, not perfection, not invulnerability. Integration means that the wounded parts of you are no longer exiled. It means your fear is acknowledged, not allowed to rule. It means your tenderness is protected, not buried. It means your anger becomes conscious instead of leaking out as bitterness. It means you stop identifying only with the version of yourself that can endure and begin making room for the version that can feel. That shift changes everything. Because the goal is not to create a life where nothing can touch you. That life would also be unable to nourish you. The goal is to become inwardly solid enough that pain no longer forces you to disappear. To reach the point where disappointment hurts but does not erase you. Where rejection stings but does not make you betray your own truth. Where another person's failure is no longer confused with your worth. This is how nobody gets to destroy you again. Not because you become cold, because you become rooted. There is a kind of inner protection that does not come from shutting down. It comes from self-possession, from knowing what you feel while you feel it. From staying with yourself in conflict. From not rushing to reshape your soul just to keep someone close. From refusing to trade authenticity for emotional safety. That is what many wounded people were never taught. They were taught to adapt, to smooth things over, to stay pleasing, to manage the emotional weather of everyone around them. So when pain comes, their first instinct is not self-loyalty, it is self-erasure. Jung would say this is how the false self grows. Not through vanity, through necessity. You become what helps you survive the people around you. But survival identities eventually become prisons. They keep out the knife, they also keep out the sunlight. And after enough years, the deeper ache is no longer only that others hurt you, it is that you can no longer fully find yourself. That is why the real turning point is not the moment you decide to feel nothing. It is the moment you decide to stop abandoning what is true in you. Even when you are afraid, even when you are disappointed, even when being real may cost you closeness. That is the beginning of individuation, the slow return to a life built from the inside instead of from defense. You speak more honestly. You withdraw with clarity instead of resentment. You let people disappoint you without rewriting yourself around their limits. You stop trying to become untouchable. You become present. And presence is stronger than armor. Because armor can only resist. Presence can endure, feel, choose, and remain whole. So maybe the deepest meaning of that sentence is not what it first appears to be. Nothing and nobody will ever hurt you again. Not because the world will become gentle, not because human beings will stop failing you, but because you will no longer help pain finish the job. You will no longer turn against yourself after being wounded. You will no longer bury your truth to avoid loss. You will no longer confuse numbness with peace. And one day, that change becomes visible in quiet ways. You tell the truth without shaking. You leave what degrades you sooner. You feel pain without becoming it. You stay open without becoming unguarded. You stay soft without becoming fragile. That is not invincibility. It is something better. It is wholeness. And once a person becomes whole, the world may still touch them, but it can no longer take them away from themselves.